Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of the Sperging Out Podcast. My name is Mitch Grace, and I'm the author of the book Growing Up with Asperger's, Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom, available on Amazon now. I am joined by my co-host extraordinaire.
Hey, hello, I'm Aaron. I am a in-home therapist for adults with autism.
And today, we are going to be going over... Last episode, we went over what is and isn't autism, and today we're going to go over the testing and diagnosing process to confirm whether or not you in fact have autism or not, as well as the difficulties and benefits regarding getting tested. So I'm going to share my personal experiences first, and then my co-host extraordinaire is going to go over the more technical and medical side of things. So I was diagnosed with, in 2010, I was seeing a therapist. I was seeing multiple therapists, actually. I was seeing what I believe to be a speech behaviorist. I'll have to go back with get my parents to exactly find out what their occupations were. And I was also seeing a therapist because I was going through a bit of a rough time. And then the therapist eventually told my parents, like, "Hey, I'm pretty sure your kid has autism. I suggest, it is my professional opinion that you get him tested." And so I got tested, and so eventually, they saw the results. They were like, "Yep, our kid has autism," and then they showed those results to the behavioral therapist I was seeing at the time, and then they said, "Yep, this all makes sense. So we suggest you change schools, yada yada yada." That was in 2010. Medically speaking, on my medical records, my primary care physician wasn't, informed of my autism until 2014. And that is why on my medical records it says that my Asperger's diagnosis doesn't show up until 2014, even though I was diagnosed 4 years prior. And so, I gotta be honest, I don't and my co-host is going to get into this later, but I don't remember doing anything with my primary care physician in regards to, a checklist of, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? Okay, yep, you check all these boxes. Maybe I got tested diagnosed elsewhere, and they just sent that info to my primary care physician, who just said, "Yep, this makes sense," from what I know of him. But yeah, that is my history, and a tease for an upcoming episode for the release of the book coming out. I've already been diagnosed, but testing, I am getting, before the book was released, I got myself tested by professionals again, because I got tested back when I was much younger, and now I'm much older, so I'm going to get retested. I got retested, and my co-host and I will go over the results as well as the testing formats and whatnot in a later episode. But enough about me. Mr. Co-host extraordinaire, testing and diagnosing on autism. Please, yes. What do you have to say?
So the primary two things when it comes to autism are assessments and diagnosis. A diagnosis is federal and medical and standardized. Once you're diagnosed with autism, it's just there. You have it on your record forever, and you'd never have to retest or re-diagnose yourself. That's just a thing. That's how you get special education programs and all the federal Social Security and all that stuff that the federal government does for you. That's all you need is the diagnosis. And it's pretty easy to get. Doctor essentially goes through a checklist of symptoms and goes, "Does this apply, yes or no?" And once they get that checklist, you're good and dandy. Assessments, on the other hand, are much more complicated. Assessments are individualized for whatever program you're applying for, whatever company or insurance company is doing it, or whatever your specific state's requirements are. So you often get retested or reassessed periodically. In many states, it's once a year, especially if it's through insurance for therapy services. And you can retest out of having an autism assessment, which is wild to me, because obviously it's congenital. It's a thing you just have. You don't suddenly just stop having autism, just like you suddenly don't start having autism one day. So it gets confusing. The assessments are genuinely, in my field, a nightmare, because different insurance companies have different requirements, and a lot of times the assessments are very social or society oriented, where it's like, will this person be a productive member of society? Can they hold a job, make money, raise a family, which a lot of people with autism absolutely can do with the right support. And as a therapist, we're genuinely giving them the right support. And then they do an assessment and they're like, oh, well, they assessed that they don't have any problems. So you don't need therapy anymore. And then obviously the moment they get off therapy, things start to fall off. Like, they start missing days of work or having trouble with their family and stuff. And it's kind of a crapshoot a lot of the time. Probably due to insurance companies it costs them money. So they do everything in their power to avoid having to pay out. The main important things are if you suspect your kid has autism or suspect you have autism, get diagnosed as soon as possible. Once you have the diagnosis, you're good. And then when it comes to assessments, those are just based on whatever program you're trying to do. Primarily, in my experience, they're post-secondary programs. So programs that kiddos go to after high school. Because through high school is all special education. That's federal. Got the diagnosis, you're good. After that, though, there's wait lists, queues that could go on for like 20 years. Insane waiting. Like, by the time you get into this post-secondary program, you're already 40. Like, it's pointless. But that's why you need to get assessed very early on, as soon as possible, and apply all these programs as soon as you can. Even ones you don't think you'll need or your parents don't think the kid will need, just apply for them all. It's better to have options than have nothing. And then the assessments are all just, you really have to go into it with like blunt honesty. Don't sugarcoat things. Don't cherry pick. Be as blunt and honest as possible. And always reorient back towards like, this is how it will affect their life in the long term and affect their ability to be a productive member of society and their mental and emotional health. Because that's really what assessments are looking for, is like, will this person have catastrophic problems in their life because of their diagnosis or because of their autism?
Yes, there was... When I got tested, I remember trying to find a facility that took insurance, and what was discouraging to discover was that a lot of the facilities went on their website, I called, and they said, because I am insured through my employer. And so, I had to check to see if this assessment, if this testing facility, accepted insurance, and oftentimes they didn't. In fact, the place where I did end up getting tested before the book came out was they had 3 insurances listed. And then I called them and said, hey, starting this calendar year, 2024, we're not accepting this insurance anymore.
Yep.
So I have to pay out of pocket. And the testing is not cheap. It is thousands of dollars. And that I find that troubling because, the diagnosis is one thing. You can go to your primary care physician and do that. But if you want more specific and detailed answers about, and even guidance for parents, hope you have the right insurance, because if you don't, it's going to cost you a boatload. And that, my heart goes out to the parents and the kiddos that need that kind of clarification, that need that guidance, that need the answers to those questions.
Yeah, it's really insane, honestly, the hoops you have to jump through for assessments. My company does assessments, and most companies that do therapy don't accept Medicaid or Medicare insurance because it's cheap. It's the cheapest one there is. I think the waiver is $45 an hour, which $45 an hour, not a lot of money, especially when you have to split between the company and the employee and the person doing the assessment. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of time spent for very little return. But our company does do it because we know how important it is for these clients and their parents to get these assessments, to understand what they're dealing with. And then on top of that, you have to worry about other insurances. Like you mentioned, multiple insurance companies. I currently have a client that just lost services because their primary insurance, totally good with our company, totally accepts therapy, totally into it. Their secondary insurance does not. And since their secondary insurance does not, their primary insurance can't do anything about it.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, which is insane, right? So they can't get services because of their secondary insurance.
That's ridiculous.
It's insane. And the way the coverage works is so scattershot that you have to double check, triple check everything just to make sure.
So not without listing company names, can you think of some other examples where maybe not the primary and secondary issue like you mentioned, but of a family that is struggling to convince their insurances, hey, this is services we need. Here's the diagnosis, all that stuff.
Yes, I have one client that lost services because he has too high of an income.
What?
He makes, I think, like $1,300 a month, which is like $300 above the minimum required to get coverage. So he lost his Social Security benefits. And by losing his Social Security benefits, he also lost his Medicaid waiver, which is what paid for the therapy. And so he's in this weird situation where he's like, do I lower my income and become less independent, which is the opposite of what therapy should be about? Or do I try to go it alone independently without any support, which also is, a trap, a minefield.
What did you say his income was a month?
It was about $1,300 a month, maybe $1,400. But yeah, I think the limit's $900 or $1,100 a month for Social Security. Some very extremely low number.
So yeah,
and there's this weird, horrible gray area sometimes, at least in the state we're in, where you are making more money than you're making too much money to get Social Security. But by making more money than you get for Social Security, you're not getting your Social Security checks, which actually means you're making less money every month. So instead of getting your $600 check in the mail on top of your income of like $900, you're now making $1,100, which is just too much. So you actually lose money because you're working more and making more money.
So I typed, you said it was $1,300 or $1,400 a month. I typed that in times 12 into a calculator. That's only $16,000.
It's extremely low. In some states. Depends on the state.
Yeah.
Different states have different standards.
Gotcha.
Which is also extremely confusing. Again, diagnoses, standardized.
Mm-hmm.
Assessments, not standardized. Not at all.
It depends on the state.
Yep. Depends on the state and the program. And, I mean, a lot of post-secondary programs have their own personal assessments they do, which makes it even more confusing. Because then you have to do an insurance assessment. And then on top of that, you have to do whatever the program-specific assessment is. And those programs are very choosy. Mostly because the budgets are usually pretty small.
Since you work for this company, have you ever had to do any assessments?
Yes, I've done multiple social assessments of just understanding figurative language, imagery, figures of speech, stuff like that.
Yeah, could you elaborate on that? Obviously, because of HIPAA, you can't go too much into it, but can you elaborate as much as you can?
Yeah, so I was working with this kiddo, say his name's Bimmy.
Bimmy, okay.
And it's a booklet that just has a bunch of social scenarios of like, hey, your friends are hanging out a bunch without you and you feel bad. What do you say? And it has multiple choices. And you have to pick the right one. And like, to me, it's obvious which is the correct one, but the client had a very difficult time picking which thing to say. Others were figures of speech, like metaphors, analogies, stuff that, again, comes very naturally to everyone. Client, again, did not understand most of them. Took them very literally, which obviously, what was it? Two in the hand, or one in the hand's worth two in the bush, I think is the saying. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Or what is it? Killing two birds with one stone. Killing two birds with one stone. That's an easy one. Everyone gets that one.
Yep.
Not everyone gets that one though. Client would not get that. He'd be like, "Why are we killing birds? I don't understand." And you're like, "Yeah, I guess it is a weird phrase." But yeah, that was the assessment I did. That's the most common assessment I do. I generally work with older clients. I'm more on social skills and like Big Brother stuff, learning how to cook, independent life skills. The assessments for independent life skills are very straightforward from my company. Can they cook? Yes or no? Do they feel comfortable cleaning the bathroom? Can they handle a job interview? Can they answer basic questions about themselves, like their name, their address, their phone number, what day of the week it is, stuff like that.
So the assessments change based on the age and I guess maturity of the client?
Yes, that's a very important one, especially at our company in general, is to make sure you are applying the right assessment. Because certain clients, if you apply like a high-level social assessment to a client who is very low functioning, they will read as dead. They'll be like, they got a 0. They don't exist. This assessment's useless. Like, it's the wrong assessment. But then if you do the opposite, where you get a low-level assessment, like, being able to like brush your teeth and put on clothing in the morning, to a high-level, high-functioning client that's like going to college, they're going to pass. They're going to make 100, pass with flying colors, and seem like they have no neurodivergence. So obviously you need to make sure you're picking the correct assessment for the correct person, which can get even worse when the insurance company is expecting a specific assessment, and you're like, okay, but this assessment does not apply to this client and their needs. And then it becomes a whole argument you have to have with the insurance company usually.
Wow.
Yeah. Assessments are really, since they are so varied and so individualized, it is very confusing, very
Now,
difficult.
now off camera, I remember you and I were talking about this previously, and you mentioned that you should actually have someone who works for insurance fill out these forms and applications too
Yes.
for these post-secondary programs.
Yes, you should absolutely try to get either if you're a kiddo in high school or your child is a kiddo in high school, getting their counselor to help fill out this stuff, because their counselor is supposed to be the person filling out this stuff. Oftentimes it doesn't happen, but they are the one who's supposed to do it. And they know the right things to write to really set off the bells and whistles for the insurance company. There are certain phrases, certain words that, almost like building a good resume, certain phrases sell the idea to the insurance company because they're looking for those specific phrases.
Example?
A lot of stuff about like logical extremes.
Mm-hmm.
So like Bimmy's not making friends at school. This is going to make Bimmy depressed. This puts Bimmy at risk for suicide.
Oh my.
You know, which is a stretch. You know,
Yeah.
you're making a lot of leaps. But that is what the insurance company wants, because if you don't say those parts, they don't think about those parts. But that's really what they want to know is like, will this lead to societal or tragedy or anything serious?
Life-threatening almost.
Yes, exactly. And you
Uh-huh.
have to make those leaps because oftentimes that is what happens. Kid doesn't make friends in high school, can't get into college, gets super depressed, gets suicidal. And so you have to put that down, even though it is making a lot of leaps. And a lot of times parents will not feel comfortable with that information being put out. And you have to be like, but this, you need the insurance coverage, and this is how you get the insurance coverage. You have to put that stuff down. Same with holding a job. That's another one that's commonly comes up. Even when you're talking about post-secondary programs for kids just going into college, you have to really focus on like their ability to hold a job and have a job independently. And you have to include like, hey, one day mom and dad are going to pass away. They cannot take care of this kid forever. Eventually they have to be independent in society, or at least independent with some supports like in a care home.
Are there care homes that take in severely autistic individuals?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I mean, a lot of them. The primary care homes primarily take in individuals who can't take care of themselves, who need a nurse at all times. So it's a lot of times elderly, or on the flip side, it's people with low functioning autism and other disabilities that are similar.
Wow. Didn't realize that.
Yeah, very common.
I understand this is like worst case scenario, but applying for a severely autistic individual to get into one of these care homes, is that process similar to the post-secondary applications?
Yes, very similar. It's depends on the state, it depends on the location, it depends on the care home itself. There's so many levels to it. I mean, it's the same. It's extremely varied and extremely individualized. So like a lot of times it's based on just room. A lot of these care homes simply do not have any more rooms. So obviously, even if Bimmy is the lowest functioning individual and absolutely needs the care, nothing they can do. They don't have anywhere to put him. But when it comes to like actually getting in and doing the assessments, it's the same exact process. Oftentimes, care homes are run through LIDAs or insurance companies. So if you've already done the assessment with the insurance company, they essentially apply that information to their personal care home or whatever care home they help fund.
What's a LIDA?
It's like that's a deep one. It's like an in-between insurance company. It's like a middleman insurance company.
Huh.
So like you'll have Blue Cross Blue Shield, which is like big old insurance company, super well known, everyone knows them. And then you have a LIDA, which is a smaller company that helps handle the insurance funding from Blue Cross Blue Shield to you. It's almost like a miniature insurance company, like an insurance company with 10 people working at it.
Gotcha.
More local.
Okay.
There's more nuance than that, but that's the simplest way to explain it.
So you recommend getting this. So due to the wait lists, you recommend getting these testing and diagnosis and applications to post-secondary programs done as fast as possible.
As soon as you can. Absolutely as soon as you can. Also, this is going to sound psychotic, but another very good trick is to find out the state's funding fiscal year cycle. And then either hit up the school counselor or whoever you're working with to get into post-secondary programs and apply right when funding is given or right before funding ends, for funding cycles over. Because a lot of times it's a rat race to get in before funding runs out. If funding runs out, obviously they cannot even help your kid. So you either get in at the very beginning when everyone's trying to get in and there's funding to go around, or at the very end and hoping there's some leftover funding because maybe some people signed up for stuff and then backed out at the last minute, because that leftover funding is just thrown away if it's not used. It's just given back to the state or back to whoever. So that's the other time to do it, is right at the very end, because there might be some extra dinero that would help get BIMI into the right programs.
Man, this really is the fact they have to game the system so much.
Unfortunately, that is the case, yeah. That's why the federal system's so simple. It's like once you have the diagnosis, you just get those federal rights, those federal promises.
And for those autistic individuals or even parents that might not know what those promises and benefits and rights are, would you mind going into that?
I mean, unfortunately for federal, it is primarily just the medical diagnosis, which stays in your record forever, and special education, because it's a public, federally funded education. After that, it's really down to the state.
Gotcha.
After that, like all post-secondary or state, all Social Security, depending on the state you're in. Most Social Security is based entirely on the state. And then you have to deal with whatever the state's requirements are. And the state's budget. States don't have infinite money like the federal government.
So you mentioned earlier how there's a chance, a person could be, out of high school by the time they finally get accepted into these programs.
Yes.
What should an autistic individual do at that point where, let's say, they're out of high school, they're in college, and they just now get accepted into these programs? What should they coordinate with the disability services?
Yeah. In general, you would coordinate with the disability services. I mean, at this point, if you're already in college, you should already be coordinating with your disability services in college to get benefits, I guess, would be the nice way to put it. Extra time on tests.
Yep,
ability to record lessons.
I got that.
Scribes if you can't write your own notes.
Oh, I very much got that.
I'm jealous. I wish I had a scribe. I was so lazy in college.
There were definitely classes where it was needed and it was necessary, and there were other classes where like I don't need a scribe.
Oh,
like
yeah.
There was an English class where I had to write essays, and there's literally a point where I told the scribe, "Hey, I don't need you anymore. I'm going to tell the disability services thanks, but for this class I don't need you.
Yeah.
I don't require your services." But
yeah, in college you should definitely get that stuff. No, then when it comes to post-secondary programs, most post-secondary programs, the intent is to be a replacement for college. So like they're college light experiences. Some of them you live on a college campus but don't actually take classes, so it's like testing your ability to be independent. And then other times it's taking college classes but not living on campus, so it's the opposite. You're getting the college education without the full expectation of independence. It really depends on the program you've chosen. But the main thing is, like, I think it's 15 for this state. It's probably different in different states. But it's 15 where it's like, okay, now you can sign up for all these programs. Sign up for all of them. Every single one you can, sign up for it. And then once you get to the end of the queue and you get offered these programs, you can pick and choose which ones you actually want.
So another question I had for you, you said there are two types of college programs. One where you're on campus but don't take classes, and there's another one where you take classes but you're not on a college campus. Can you walk us through the pros and cons of both of those? Like you did say, apply for all of them, and I concur with that. But I would be curious to see, what your thoughts on both of those programs.
Sure. And those aren't the two only programs. There's everything in between as well. There are ones where you live on a college campus and take a single class. And if you don't show up to class, someone comes and gets you and takes you to class. Like, they will not let you miss class.
Oh, my.
That's actually a pretty common program, and that's a very good one, honestly. Treating it more like high school. But the pros and cons are really dependent on the individual's needs. So, like, if the individual is educationally all there, is very intelligent, very bright, take college classes. You'll nail it. You'll do great. But then if they have issues with, actually living independently, like they can't cook, or they struggle with just socializing, or they get overburdened by too many people in class. That's pretty common. They just get overwhelmed with college. That's one where it'd be off campus, still taking college classes. Like you drive them to the campus, they'd sit in class, take the class, and you drive them home, or some driver would do that.
Now,
for the independence one's a nice middle ground though, because it's like, you're not taking college classes, so you're not having to struggle with that, but you're learning how to live independently, and then once you're comfortable with that, you start taking college classes.
Okay. Now, wasn't there an instance rather recently where you actually went to the college where Bimmy was attending, and you actually integrated him into that lifestyle, correct?
Yes.
Please tell us all about that.
So it's a college that is known for having a lot of neurodivergent people, but it is not a special program for neurodivergent people. It's a small college that's very specific, and they do hunt you down if you don't show up to class. But they do that for every individual at that college, which is a very unique situation, to be quite honest. And the college itself is very small. I think it's like 1,000 students, maybe 1,500. So it's not overwhelming, and the classes are genuinely very good. But the experience with my client, I integrated myself as a student. I just lied to people and told them I was a student, and they believed me, which is wild because I do not look like a student. But hey, college students are gullible, apparently. Freshmen, at least. But yeah, I integrated myself really well, and the primary thing I worked with my client was helping him make friends and socialize, because he's meeting all these brand new people, and he was coming from a school where he didn't really have many friends because his personality and the school's general population were very different, and not in a bad way. It wasn't because of his autism. He's more of a cool theater kid, geeky type, whereas the school he went to is like a varsity, football school. Yeah, not really a good fit. Whereas at the new college he's going to, there are people like him. So I was helping him integrate and make friends and talk to people and like learn that he can really just be himself and not have to keep to himself. And just making sure he was like okay with living in a dorm room with other people, okay with using their truly horrific restrooms, by the way. Just throwing that out there. It was real bad. At one point, one of the students said, I wear shoes when I go to take a shower because I don't want my feet to touch the floor. And at one point, I slipped a little, and I thought, you know what? It's better to crack my head on the wall than to fall on the ground and have to touch the floor. In the shower. And you're like, yeah, that's a bad sign when someone's willing to die before touching the floor.
Oh my God. Goodness. Right? Wow.
Not to talk poorly, the school's education, the programs are good. It's just the dorms are old and not well kept.
So this is a program I did not know existed. So like you had previously told me about going to Bimmies College and getting them integrated and whatnot, but I had no idea that this is a college specifically dedicated for neurodivergent people.
Yeah, well, it's not. It just, I don't even know how to describe it. It's not specifically dedicated to neurodivergent people, but it advertises itself as very neurodivergent friendly. So a lot of the students there are neurodivergent, despite it not being a special program for that. It's also a very picky college because of the small student population, so they tend to pick people with neurodivergent social skills, but are also quite intelligent.
Gotcha.
Because it is not an easy college.
That sounds fair. So my follow-up question to that is, I didn't know this program existed, or I didn't know this college existed. That just so happens to be friendly to, yada yada yada. What I was wanting to know is for parents who may be completely lost on, we keep talking about these programs. Where do they look for these programs and how can they apply?
The first and most important place is high school counselors. High school counselor should know about these programs and should know how to sign up for these programs and know where to find them. They have all the resources. They're the ones who get the budget. They're the ones who are supposed to be doing this. That being said, depending on the state, depending on the school, a lot of those high school counselors have no idea what they're doing. So then it becomes a real kind of crapshoot. You Google, literally the internet, look up colleges in your area, look up what their programs are. Most of these programs are ran through the college by an independent organization or associated with the college itself. But Google is your best bet if the high school counselor is not helping, is not knowledgeable.
Would families' primary care physician, like a family practitioner, would they know?
Probably not. Most nose throat doctors are not really well versed in these programs because this is much more of like an insurance financial thing rather than a medical thing. They might know, depends on the doctor, but usually not so much.
Gotcha. Alrighty. What would you say? Let's see. You've said to go over applies many. How long does an application take? Like, as if you're applying to all of these programs, should you do it in one sitting? Can you do it in one sitting?
It depends on the program. A lot of them expect you to do like video interviews or send videos in or do like assessments that are a little more rigorous than like a checkbox or a test.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of these programs expect interviews because it makes sense. So like, legally, the individual themselves and their counselor has to be the one doing the entire application, not their mother, not their father. By law. But reality is, most of the time, mom and dad are doing out the application. I mean, let's be real. Like, that's normal.
Yeah.
So the interview process and the video interview is to make sure that what they're getting told on the application is accurate to how the client or person is in real life. So they expect, the person to either show up for an in-person interview or record a video interview so they can see their social skills and general skill set.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because no post-secondary program wants an application to be like, oh, Bimmy's great. He just struggles with like social like issues and can get overburdened by a lot of people being around, only to find out they're actually low functioning and can't like read. That does happen. So they start doing interviews to make sure like, hey, this person is the person we're getting like told about, not getting lied to or manipulated. Because each individual they take in is one slot less for other people. So they don't want to take in any people who are bad fits, poor fits for the program.
That is true. That is true. Is there anything else you want to discuss regarding testing, diagnosis, all that stuff?
The main thing I want to stress is get diagnosed and get assessed and apply for everything as soon as you can. Because, again, I'm not exaggerating when there are wait lists that are up to 20 years. And it's like, you apply at 15, 20 years later, you're 35. Some of those programs are worthless at 35. You don't, like, it's just not good. You definitely want to do it as soon as possible.
Yeah, and that's the logistical and medical side of things. The personal side of things is when I got diagnosed and tested with confirmed to have autism. When I was younger, I always knew something was wrong with me, but I couldn't quite figure out what it was. This put a name to it, and then everything just started to click. Everything started to make sense. And I felt, I gotta admit, I was pissed at first. I was like, oh, what do you mean I'm autistic? What do you mean? I was livid about it. But then slowly, it was clarifying.
Yeah.
I felt a sense of ease where it's like, okay, yeah, now I know what's going on inside my brain.
It can definitely bring a sense of closure in a way where it's like,
yes.
Now I have a name for the condition that I felt I've had for a long time instead of just being floating around in the dark, unsure of how to even describe it.
Yes. And
of course, there is a flip side where it creates a stigma.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
that's inevitable with any sort of label.
It's true. It is true.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I have to say on this subject. So if we think about this later, we may discuss it up again if the demand is high enough or if we feel like it. And like I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast, before the book came out, I got retested, reevaluated, and reassessed for autism. And on a future episode, my co-host extraordinaire and I will go through it live, and you'll get to see the results firsthand. Until then, co-host extraordinaire.
Yeah.
Last episode, we discussed our favorite pieces of media, movies, video games, TV shows. What about the flip side of that coin? What is a movie, a TV show, or video game that you just can't stand?
Ooh, oh man, there's so many. Let's start with video game. That's probably the easiest. What's a bad video game that people like? No, what's a bad video game in general? There's so many of them. Oh gosh.
There's the EA Star Wars Battlefront games.
Starfield.
Oh, Starfield.
Let's go. Pulls out gun in real life. Todd Howard. How dare you release such a boring, bland product? I mean, seriously, Starfield is the most boring game I've ever played. It's not the worst game I've ever played, but it's up there for the highest budget, blandest experience I've ever experienced. And the story's bad, the writing's bad, the dialogue's bad. All the characters are unkillable, so you can't even have like open world fun. The RPG elements are non-existent. There's no space exploration in the space game. There aren't even aliens, not sentient ones, which is like wild. It's like the most vanilla, bland, boring space experience you could possibly manufacture.
Are you saying that the Skyrim in space, moniker it has garnered is unjust?
It's unjust because it's much worse than Skyrim. But it is just too. They literally call you the Starborn as a like you're called the Dragonborn in Skyrim, and they call you the Starborn in Starfield. I shit you not. And you get shouts. You get dragon shouts.
What?
You get unironic magic abilities that are just dragon shouts from Skyrim.
I thought this was a space game.
In a space game where they're trying to be grounded and realistic, which is why there's no fun sentient aliens. They give you magic, space magic.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wasn't expecting that.
The game's bad. Straight up.
All right, well.
The intro's really long, too, and boring. I could go on. That game's so bland.
What are your thoughts? So, Bethesda they're the publishers of the Fallout series. The Fallout game that is considered to be the best, New Vegas, was developed by a developer named Obsidian, and they made a space game called The Outer Worlds. What are your thoughts on that game?
Oh, I'm actually not a fan of The Outer Worlds either. So The Outer Worlds is better than Starfield in the sense that it's more unique and more interesting, but its writing runs dry really quick. So the punchline to the very beginning of the game, the first planet you go to, the first joke, the first theme is, corporations are dumb. And that's the rest of the game. Every joke, every dialogue, everything just reiterates back to the point of, corporations are bad and dumb. And you're like, oh my fucking God, I get it. It's one note. Oh, it's awful. Now, that being said, there are some interesting characters that are fun to talk to.
Yeah.
And the shooting and world is a little more interesting than Starfield, but at the end of the day, it's still kind of janky, kind of bland.
Yeah, I remember seeing an interview where one of the developers of The Outer Worlds saying, it's about corporatism, but this isn't a jab at Bethesda or anything. I call... editor, you're going to need to edit what I'm about to say. I call bullshit on that. With corporate overreach being the forefront theme of the entire damn story, whenever that developer said, no, this isn't a jab at Bethesda, that is the biggest fucking lie I have ever goddamn heard, and that guy is lying out his ass.
They should have gone harder. They should have made the final boss, the big evil corporate overlord, just Todd Howard. Like, unironically called him like Hod Toward, and made him like 2 feet tall, and just like made it very clear that the bad company was Bethesda. Because after what Bethesda did to them for New Vegas, I'd be mad too. Did you know about that?
The typical game development cycle takes 3 years. They were given 9 months or something.
Yeah, they were given 9 months. Somehow made the best Fallout game, and I will stand behind that. It is the best Fallout game, New Vegas. And then its Metacritic score was 1 point below a contractual threshold to get their bonus pay.
Are you kidding me?
And the company went under.
Wow.
Obsidian literally was going to go bankrupt until they kickstarted Pillars of Eternity.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
Yes, I can, because this is Bethesda.
Bethesda wanted to bankrupt this developer who made the best Fallout game because their Metacritic score is 1 point lower than the threshold.
Oh, that's so stupid.
And when you go and look at like the reviews on Metacritic, a lot of them are like, "Oh, this is really buggy on release," and it's like, man, did Bethesda pay for bad reviews? Like, I mean, Bethesda gave them 9 months to make a game that should take much longer, and the writing is so good. Fallout New Vegas is such a masterpiece. Best Fallout game.
And Starfield is not.
No, absolutely not.
It's sticking on
Bethesda has... Well, that's not true. Skyrim's a good game. I like Skyrim. It's bland. Oblivion, great game. Awesome. Morrowind, pinnacle. Masterpiece.
Did Obsidian do any Morrowind or the other one? Not
No.
Skyrim, but...
No, Obsidian were the initial developers for the original Fallout games, or some of them were.
But they had no hand in the Skyrim series, the Elder Scrolls series?
No Morrowind, no Oblivion, no Skyrim.
Oblivion.
That was all Bethesda.
Okay, so... Sticking on the negative train and sticking with space, the Electronic Arts Star Wars Battlefront game. So there is an interview where one of the lead developers of the fabled Star Wars Battlefront 3 that got canceled at the last second, he said that the game was 98% done. However, he has actually walked that statement back recently, or someone on the development team has walked that statement back and corrected the previous statement saying, okay, it wasn't actually at 98% done. We were really at it could be anywhere from between 75 and 80% done. And so, but what boggles my mind is that they had Pandemic Studios had the formula for, and I think they had a formula for a good Star Wars Battlefront game. It's just the same formula for the Battlefield series, but with Star Wars.
Yep.
That is it. And to EA's credit, they sort of expanded on that. You have a lot more weapons to choose from, all with different area. You can pick your classes a bit more, where in the OG Star Wars Battlefront 2, it was the Assault has a rocket launcher and a pistol. That's it. Have fun. In the newer games, you can be like, okay, you can have a rocket launcher and some guns, and you can sort of tweak around your explosives and secondaries. But that formula was due for an update, but the core of that formula didn't need to be changed. The mechanics of that didn't need to be changed at all. It was combined arms conflicts and battles in Star Wars locations. You can't mess that up. EA messed that up. It boggles my mind. Perfect example. In the original Star Wars Battlefront 2, you can go to Hoth, and you can get into a snowspeeder and track down the walkers, or you can pilot one of the walkers. It is absurdly fun. In the previous Star Wars in the newer Star Wars Battlefront games, the AT-ATs, the walkers, they're fucking kill streaks.
Yeah.
Now tell me, does that sound fun to you?
I love Call of Duty.
Does that sound fun?
No.
I don't think it's fun.
No, not at all.
They had the formula and what frustrates me even more about the newer Battlefront games is the business ethics of it. In Star Wars, the first one, they had a $50 season pass that when games still cost $60. That is almost an entirely new game, and one of the key expansions was a Death Star battle map, where if you're the Empire, you're trying to protect the Death Star. If you're the Rebels, you're trying to blow it up. That sounds fun. I've seen gameplay of it. It is fun. The fact that they hid it behind a $50 paywall when I already paid $60 goddamn dollars for the motherfucking game is fucking horseshit.
Yeah.
And then we get to the sequel game where, oh, there is no season pass. You're getting a whole lot of updates. They found a way around that.
Microtransactions.
Yes, microtransactions.
So they're not really micro when they're $50 each.
Yes, it frustrates me to no end. And they said, but it's going to be a live service. You guys are getting new content as the year goes on. Why was this in the game to begin with? Why were the Clone Wars a free update? The original Battlefront game had that. And yes, the original Star Wars Battlefront 2 had DLC that was only exclusive to the Xbox players, but it was so small, and the game package you got on it itself was so complete that you didn't need it.
Yeah, don't you miss when you could buy a game and just have the whole complete game and be like, oh, they might release an expansion pack down the line, but I'm okay with the product I've received for the money I've given.
Yes, I miss that day very,
and now
very
every
much.
game's a live service. They're like, oh, I got 1/10 of a game, and I have to wait for the other 9/10 to come out.
Let me ask you, co-host extraordinaire. Do you think a second gaming crash would... like industry crash. I'm talking ET on Atari levels crash.
Oh, jeez.
Do you think a crash like that would correct this problem?
I don't think so. I think they've fine-tuned, especially in the console market, the monetary money-making schemes to the point where all the money incentives are towards microtransactions, live game services, free-to-play games, and mobile apps. Because rich people blow their money on that stuff, and it makes them a lot more money than making a genuinely good product. Really, the only way to get, from a corporate capitalist standpoint, more good products is simply passionate artists working on those products who want to make the game good because they want the game to be good. If money is the primary goal, then you're going to get microtransactions and all that slimy stuff we hate.
Yeah, if you want a perfect example of this, look no further than Grand Theft Auto 5.
Ooh.
Grand Theft Auto 5 came out in 2013, and it got re-released a bunch, but previously in Rockstar released games, there was Red Dead Redemption 1, and while it had a very fun multiplayer component, it had a single-player DLC, downloadable content, called Undead Nightmare. It's a standalone story, and it was a lot of fun. Grand Theft Auto 4. I can't remember if it had a multiplayer element or not, but it did get two pretty substantial single-player DLCs, The Lost and the Damned and The Ballad of Gay Tony. Both very fun to play and were both decent expansions upon the world that GTA 4 had created. Grand Theft Auto 5 comes out. There is no single-player DLC. It's all multiplayer.
A lot of multiplayer content.
Yes, and it's
locked out of the single player. Almost all the added content in the multiplayer in GTA Online is simply not in the single player. You cannot use the content in the single player at all. Which is wild because it should. Their reasoning is that it would diminish the value of the content in multiplayer if you could just play single player and use them.
Oh, that's so stupid.
And it's like that's literally money grabbing.
That is such backwards logic.
Yeah.
And then, this makes me very worried for GTA 6, because not too far, not a couple months, well, not too long ago from when this podcast is being recorded, we did get a trailer for Grand Theft Auto 6.
Looked really good.
And, what are they going to prioritize? Rockstar turned Grand Theft Auto 5 into the most profitable piece of media ever. So why would they do something different for Grand Theft Auto 6?
Well, even closer to home or more realized was Red Dead 2.
Oh, no.
Red Dead 2 is a masterpiece, and they had so many promises for the multiplayer to be similar to GTA Online, and they canned it all. And their reasoning was, GTA Online has made us so much money that we want to focus on making more content for this old-ass game because it makes us money, than actually realizing the online component of Red Dead 2, which would be phenomenal if they did it. But they didn't want to. So Red Dead 2's online is bare bones and shallow and skeletal and terrible for the most part.
That is a shame. Well, folks, hate to end the episode on a downer, but that's going to do it for us here at the Sperging Out Podcast. Reminder, I published a book that just goes over what we discussed here and more. The book is called Growing Up with Asperger's, Lessons Learned and Shareable Wisdom on Amazon right now. My name is Mitch Grace, and I'm joined by my co-host extraordinaire.
Thank you.
And we will see you in the next episode.
I thought you were going to say we will shit you in the next episode. And I was like, that would be perfect.
I heard